I hope it works. Yeah, it works. Okay. Welcome, everyone. I have the pleasure to introduce our guests in the panel, which will address the question of media landscape in the V4 countries. To my right, the first guest is Michał Karnowski, who is the co-founder of Fratria Publishing House in Poland. Next to him, you can see a well-known face, Zoltán Szalai, director of MCC, but also editor-in-chief of Mandiner from Hungary. Then to his right, you can see Matyáš Zdno, who is editor-in-chief at CNN Prima News in Czech Republic. And last but not least, you can find Pomiha Christian on the right, your left actually from that point of view, who is a journalist and also an editor of Ma Hét, which is a Hungarian network in Slovakia. And he will talk about both the Slovak situation in general and the special situation of the Hungarian minority. You are too young in the audience, I mean most of you, and you cannot remember the bad old ages or the good old ages. When I was a youngster, which was very, very long time ago, we had one single television channel, which had a day off on Mondays, so that was family day practically. There was no broadcasting at all. That was the time when the media was totally centralized, affiliated with the party and state organs. And that was the time when there was a monopolistic position of the communist-owned media. I'd like to ask the first question addressed to each of our participants about the transformation of the communist media. What were the main trends? What were the main changes? And how they evolved in the 1990s? How the original monopolistic position of the media was transformed into a pluralist position? We can start in this order.
Okay. Yeah, I think that the experience of all our countries were very similar. I mean, when the communism collapsed, there were huge and very loud process of creating new media, you know, buying the old titles by new groups of people, of some new companies. So the landscape was completely different after several years. But the main issue is that people had the feeling that this media landscape don't reflect their own opinion. That there are many places in which the people's voices are suppressed. So I would say that during these 30 years there was, on the one hand, the constant improvement of the Polish media, and on the second hand, the constant fight to do them more pluralistic, more open to all voices, all point of views. Especially, I think it's worth emphasizing that the conservative voices were suppressed for many, many years. Even 6 years ago, there was no Polish television which might say anything good about the conservative party. It didn't exist. There was one Catholic television, but it was a huge fight to get this television on the air. So during the last 6 years, we have a process. We may observe a process in which many conservative media platforms had the chance to develop. My own company started 10 years ago. We had a group of friends. There was a kind of a purge in Poland after the Smolensk tragedy. We had no job, and we decided to start something ours, something known. We had no money, we had just savings. But I think this is a good example that if you have goodwill, you are a hardworking person, and you are a bit talented, have some skills, some experience in this media area, you can create anything. And now in Poland, there are many new initiatives. Of course, many of them are weak, many of them are unable to survive. But I think our media landscape is very diverted. Every voice has a chance to be put on the air, to be broadcast. Interesting issue is about the foreign investments. At the beginning, it was like a fresh air. When the foreign company bought any Polish title, any Polish television, it was able to bring as well, of course, know-how, knowledge, technology, and it was very, very important for our media market. But after several years, it turned out that there is a price. There is a price, and if you have media outlet in other country, you want to use it. And many Poles had this impression that the media which are owned by foreign investors are used to get some political or ideological goals.
Who were the main investors? Who were the main players in the media market?
German companies are the media investors, foreign investors in Poland. There was a moment when all regional newspapers were owned by the German companies, and what was very sad that we could observe that they influenced these media, these editorial offices, even on the level of the historical memory. So even the very important Polish days, like the day when the Second World War broke, wasn't, in my opinion, weren't properly described on this media.
And what happened to the position of the public television and public radio after the opening up of the market?
Oh, it survived, and it's still the largest broadcaster in Poland.
Thank you. Zoltán?
Yeah, in Hungary it was, I think, a very similar process. So till the 1990s, all the media outlets, all the newspapers basically were in hand of the state and were controlled by the socialist party, so by the communist regime in Hungary. After 1990, there began a privatization of this media industry, just like other industries as well in Hungary. It happened very quickly, so it was a quite quick process. And I think about the same players, both media in Hungary, German, Austrian, Swiss, and American investors invested into the Hungarian media market. And of course, if you are an investor, if you want to if you invest your money, you want to get the return, you want to get the revenue. I think there was some kind of silent agreement between the new owners and the old editors of the newspapers that there was, of course, a positive side. The new investor brought better technology, better know-how, how to circulate the newspaper better, how to reach more readers. But on the other hand, of course, they needed very stable, with know-how, with skills, with experience, journalists and editors. And these editors were basically who created these newspapers before 1990, during the communist regime. And they in the most of the cases, they didn't change the editors or the heads of these newspapers. I think it was a very obvious process, because if you invest, you want that from day one your newspaper is going on, and you don't change the whole stuff to new stuff, which previously never had the chance to make a newspaper, and now they start to learn how to make a newspaper when you even invested a bunch of money to a media company. So I think that's the most important process, which was that I think after 5-10 years after the political changes in Hungary, the Hungarian media landscape was very uneven, I would say. So about 80-90% were the former communist, left-wing liberal voices in the media, and only a small part was conservative or conservative liberal.
And how would you assess the role of the public media, especially in the light of the so-called media war, which was peculiar to Hungary?
I think it's so. When I remember correctly, it was during the Horn government when the private televisions, when the first frequencies, the first national frequencies were opened and sold. So that was the time when RTL Klub and TV2, two German investors basically invested into this company. ProSieben, Sat.1, SBS, and the RTL Group invested this. And I think the public television, the public media, before, if I remember, it was 97 when these private television.
The law dates back to the first date of first act of 1996.
1996,
adopted at the end of 1995.
It was 1996, yeah. So it's so I think after that the public media. The importance of the public media is step by step going down, and if you look now on the numbers of the television market, the private sector has the largest chunk, and the public television, it's not like in Austria or in Germany, or for example in Austria still today the ORF is the number one in the television market, and not just the number one in the television market, but in the online market as well, and on the radio market as well. So there are very different developments.
Marta, Czech Republic.
Well, there is a slight difference from the Hungarian and Polish model, because our communists were obviously more stupid than especially the Hungarian ones. So while your communists used the transfer of power to privatize whatever was possible, our were really like old school hardcore communists, that really hated capitalism, and they didn't understand that they may use it for their own purposes. So most of the medias were basically privatized by their employees. The only exception was actually, surprisingly, the daily of the Communist Party of Czechoslovakia called the Red Justice. And it was somehow semi-legally privatized by its own editor-in-chief. He was one of the few smart communists. And he's running it until now. It's incredible. Like 30 years after the wall fell, and he's still running this. It's just called Just Justice, not Red Justice. But most of the medias were so privatized in other way, and as well as in Poland or Hungary, they were bought by the Germans. Rheinisch Bergische Verlag and Ringier, mainly these two like bigger German publishing houses, even not the most important. Basically, Rheinisch Bergische Verlag is a regional publisher in West Germany. But I have to say that these were not bad years, since the Germans did not really interfere in daily business. They were just interested in money, in getting their money. And it was time when, like in the 90s up to 2008, when the medias were really bringing them a good revenue back to Germany. It was also the time when the journalists were paid quite well. There were such unimaginable things as like that you get a car with the driver when you were driving somewhere for a story, which is not anymore. I mean, the medias got dramatically poorer after the financial crisis of 2008. It was also the years, the 90s, where you can make incredibly good and fast career on a very, very young age. I mean, I started to I was 10 years old. In the time of the revolution, I started to write for a respected weekly at the age of 18, and I became the foreign desk head at the age of like 24, which is a kind of, imagine you become like head of foreign desk in Der Spiegel in the age of 24, like absolutely unimaginable. And my colleagues who were just few years older, they became like editors-in-chief, like in the age of the whole newspapers at the age of 25, for example. Like a really fast career for young people who were lucky to come in the right time to the right place. Now it changed a lot after 2008 with the financial crisis that came slightly later to Czech Republic. Just it was like a perfect storm. The combination of financial crisis and internet becoming more and more widespread. So people ceased to buy newspapers. They turned to internet, and the sales got dramatically lower. And the Germans started to look, how to get rid of this. Because it was not that profitable anymore. And it suddenly came. In the age of in the years of 2013, 14, 15, when also the political landscape in Czech Republic changed dramatically, that the big oligarchs started to buy the medias. The one who started it was the current outgoing Prime Minister Andrej Babiš, one of the most richest people in Czech Republic, who, by the way, is not Czech. We have a non-Czech Prime Minister, he's Slovak. He even didn't learn correctly Czech after 30 years in Czech Republic. But he doesn't even speak correctly Slovak, by the way. No, he forgot to. He speaks something what he called the Czechoslovak language that was typical for the officers of the communist army, like very horrible mix and combination of these two languages. So Andrej Babiš bought it surprisingly shortly before he decided to turn into politics and run for the office. And suddenly all the other oligarchs, like people from big financial groups and so on, decided when he has his own media group, we may need one too. So they started to buy these media groups. Again, it was not like, don't imagine that they would suddenly totally interfere in the daily business of the media. But they had it as such a sort of a last resort weapon. In case, if Andrej Babiš would attack my business, that I have my newspaper to attack him. So this really changed the landscape, but it also offered a space for like more independent, even the smaller but growing medias that were trying to escape this trap of being owned by one or the other oligarchs. But usually they needed the financial support from some sort of friendly businessman, like. One of my favorite, it's Echo Weekly. They were supported by a weapon dealer. A very interesting person and colorful person. So that's pretty much where we are now. In case, for example, Andrej Babiš would decided to get out of politics, I'm pretty much sure he will sell his media group again, because it's not very profitable thing at this moment.
What about the influence of the public television, public radio?
Public TV. Public TV, it's a sort of like relatively respected institution in Czech Republic. They are lucky enough to have their regular financial sources, because pretty much every Czech needs to pay like around €5 a month for the public TV and public radio. There is a growing anger, especially the conservative right, towards them, because they tend to be more like liberal, not exactly a left in terms of like economic, but let's say in these culture issues, they tend to be more liberal than we would like it. But it's not, again, Czech Republic is Czech Republic. Nothing is that polarized as it is in Hungary or Poland. So, even that the public TV is, let's say, more liberal, that doesn't mean that they don't invite conservatives or so on. They just invite them lesser than liberals. It also doesn't mean that we don't talk to each other because we are Czech, so we, sit over the beer with the other opponents and are able to communicate. Even though it's slightly changing with the younger generation that is already influenced by, this culture wars and the wokeism from the Anglo-Saxon world. So even my, older friends, like all liberal editors and journalists, are kind of afraid of their younger colleagues in the offices, that they think they are just too extreme. So the public service is relatively respected, relatively well done, but it's an issue. With every election, there is someone who thinks, well, maybe it is just too expensive. Maybe it's not good that everyone has to pay it, even that you don't want it. But so far, there is a consensus, majority consensus among the political parties to keep the system as it is, even though, of course, it's some sort of like great state-owned business that is obviously not that effective as a private TV would be.
Thank you. Media structure in Slovakia.
Okay, so as I was listening to my colleagues from Hungary and Poland, it came to my mind what was different in the transition, in the revolution in Slovakia and in Czech Republic. The Velvet Revolution in Slovakia, it was velvet because there was no bloodshed. So the Velvet Revolution was pretty fast in Slovakia. Right around the middle of November, there was this first and the big protest in Prague. At the end of December, Václav Havel was the president, and the next year in June was the first democratic election. So it was really, really sudden. And the journalist was like, they didn't know what to do next. So as Mátyás said, in Slovakia too, many editorial rooms privatized their own newspaper. It was really turbulent time. For example, the Hungarian newspaper, Újszó it is called, around that time it has 60,000 readers, 60,000 Hungarian readers every day. So, for example, the USO was sold 3 times in a year after the revolution. Then it was privatized by the journalists. And right around the middle of the 90s came the Western capital. From Germany, like Axel Springer, from France, from Austria, there was a derivative of the Kronenzeitung for a short time in Slovakia. So came the Western capital, and now it's getting out from the country. There is only one German, Axel Springer is still in Slovakia with the Aktuality.sk. It's the biggest online newspaper in Slovakia, around 1 million readers a day in a country of 5.5 million people, so 1 million readers a day. And the biggest political newspaper called SME, it means we, like we are, like SME, is owned by an American company now, which is, by the way, connected to a small foundation called Open Society Foundation. But other Western capitalists or Western companies just left Slovakia. Maybe they will come back. I don't know if it's a trend that will exist in the future, but right now it's the truth.
What is the reach out of the public television compared to commercial televisions?
Mm-hmm. So the latest survey, it was an Europol survey, I think, said that 80 or 85% of Slovakian people watch TV every day. So it's, of course, it's still the most powerful medium in Slovakia. There are 2 commercial channels, just like in Hungary, the TV2 and RTL Klub. We have Markíza and TV Joj. Markíza is now owned by the richest Czech guy. His name is Petr Kellner. He just bought it. Oh, I didn't know that. Last year or 2 years ago, he bought Markíza television, which is the most powerful television in Slovakia. And then we have the TV Joj, which is another of these commercial televisions. So these are these 2 big media groups. The public television is not so powerful. Like, I don't have any data, but nobody watches it today. So.
Okay, you have already referred to some changes after the financial crisis. There were some political changes both in Poland and in Hungary. What is the current structure of the media, and especially with an emphasis on the new platforms, news portals, electronic media, or be it the social media? To what extent has been a restructuring of the media in these countries? We can start with Hungary now, if you don't mind, Zoltán.
So my statement in this regard is I started to read on a daily basis newspapers and so to say daily media from the middle of the 90s, and I do it till now. So I think what we have now is the largest plurality that we ever had in the last 3 decades. It's just, if you look in each segment, who are the market leaders in the media. In Hungary, still, just like in Slovakia, the television is probably the most important. Online media and television are one-on-one, I would say, but television still very important. Hungarians watch a lot of hours everyday television, and the number 1 private television, RTL Klub, which has the largest viewership, is more left wing, and TV2 is more right wing in Hungary. If you look on the daily newspapers, the largest one, Népszava, is left wing. The second largest, Magyar Nemzet, is right wing. If you look on the weekly newspapers, still HVG, which was the largest weekly newspaper even during the communism, is still the largest one, very much left wing newspaper, and there are others, Magyar Narancs and so on, Élet és Irodalom, which are still influential, but on the right side there are Demokrata and Mandiner, our weekly newspaper. On the online market is probably, and this whole online media is very much as I see in Slovakia, it's very similar. It's very different than how it is in Western Europe. Because in Western Europe, mainly the big media outlets, the big newspapers, let's say in Germany, Bild, Spiegel, FAZ, Süddeutsche Zeitung are the largest traditional media, printed newspapers, and they have the largest online audience as well. It's very similar in France with Figaro, with Le Monde, very similar in the United States, in Spain, in the United Kingdom. In Hungary, we have the special situation that the most important and the most influential online medias, they don't have a traditional media platform. So it's a very special development that the old media structures like the daily newspapers and the weekly newspapers, they somehow failed this online revolution, but they tried to keep their audience in the traditional print media. But a new dimension of online journalism started. We need Index, Origo, 24.hu, 444 Telex, which are the largest players now in Hungary. Blik. This is probably the only one where there is a daily newspaper and as well a very successful online platform. But all these Index, Telex, Origo, 24.hu, they don't have a print platform, and they are mainly lean to left wing. So I would say the online media is where the overhead and the majority is still more left-wing liberal than conservative or liberal.
And what about in terms of revenues, in terms of readers, what are the shares of different platforms in Hungary?
You mean between the
electronic, printed,
print,
both in terms of advertisements and revenues?
I don't have the exact numbers, but still television is very important. Online media is very important as well and growing. So I think television is keeping its performance as it in a yearly basis. It's probably with half or 1% going down and down year by year, but it's still very powerful. But the online media is growing. But of course, there is this huge trap of the online media that is a global experience that we can see, that we don't have the exact numbers, but what you can read and what economists say, that about 50% of the advertisements in the Hungarian online media are going to Facebook, Google, and co. So the big global players. Of course, we don't know the exact numbers because they are going into a large company somewhere in Ireland or the United States or wherever. But about 50% of the market is going to these big international players, and all the other players are trying to survive from the left 50% of the market.
Thank you, Mátyás. What are your rough estimates for the Czech market?
To be frank, I also don't know exactly that, but I would guess it's divided between print and online around 50-50, but it's just my estimate. The online market goes through never-ending turbulence because somehow we all learn how to deal with this new situation. They all started for free. They thought that they can live from advertisement, and they realized it's not exactly as they thought. Most of them are now behind, at least part of their content is behind paywall, and it's still something you need a few years to be sure this is a model that really is sustainable and can work. So we are in this transformation moment at this point for most of the online medias. And as for if they are connected to the traditional medias, most of the biggest online websites are connected still to the traditional media houses. Surprisingly, the second most visited news website is the one connected to the former communist daily, Red Justice.
Thank you. Christian?
I have some numbers. So the same survey I just talked about, 25% of Slovaks said that they read daily newspaper every day, 25%. I don't think that's right, because if we see the numbers of these newspapers, how many of are sold out, then, for example, we saw before the revolution it was around 100,000 each day. After the revolution, 60,000, and now it's around 10,000. The SME, the biggest political newspaper, is the same. It's around 20,000, 30,000 per day. So the numbers are going down. Which is distinct in Slovakia is that the subscriptional system is working pretty good, because the Deník N, which is in Czech Republic too, yes, it is the most left liberal woke ideologist internet newspaper in Slovakia, the only one of this far left on the far left ideology. So it has a paywall everywhere. You can't read any article if you don't subscribe for, I don't know, it's 10 euros each month, so around 3,000 forints. So this is one way, and the other way is the actualities.sk, which is the most popular, as I said, around 1 million readers each day. That is completely free. So there are two distinct ways, and it seems each and every one of them is working. So it's pretty interesting. For example, the daily newspapers SME or the Hospodárske noviny, which is owned by Andrej Babiš, by the way, it has a paywall too, so you can't read online their articles. You have to subscribe, or you have to pay to read those articles. Only actuality.sk can do this. Maybe it's because of we can talk about it later, and don't want to hold the microphone too long. We can talk about later about the killing of Jan Kuciak, this investigative journalist in 2018. He worked for actuality.sk, and the numbers of Actuality just went to the sky after the killings. Maybe we can talk about it later.
We will come back to that point later. Michał.
Okay, let me start from telling that we shouldn't trust the survey. I do agree. My first job in Warsaw was the weekly about television, something like this, about TV program. It was called Antenna, and after several years it was closed due to some reasons. But 10 years later, there was a survey in which people claimed that this is still the biggest weekly in Poland about the television. So, and the second anecdote is that one of the Polish biggest company tried to establish a new kind of tabloid. Not aggressive, because the survey showed that people want to read about music, the best classical music, no scandal, no sex, no politics. And of course, after 1 month, it collapsed. But something like $50 million were spent on this. So, we have to believe in our experience. I do believe that we have to know how to create the media. In Poland, the biggest media, if I can give you the simplest answer, are two internet. We call it portals. It's kind of huge websites with many sources of information, many articles, many videos inside. Not just the first page, but it is just the title, the first page for the in fact, I know, library of news, and it is of course associated with e-commerce, and these are wp.pl, wp.pl, and it is Polish, in Polish hands, and the second is onet.pl, it is in German hands. So about more or less 20 million people read every day these newspapers, these media outlets. And that's why any model in which you try to sell your content via internet doesn't work. Because if you want money from people, they may find more or less the same for free. So there is only one serious attempt to create something like this. Very liberal Gazeta Wyborcza is offering their content on the internet, but they sell it very cheap. So there are many gossips, many rumors that this project is not as successful as it is described. Yeah, I think that the phenomena of the Polish market is the very strong position of the public television. I think it was not by accident. For many years, when there was no conservative media in Poland and when there was no conservative journalist in the public television, or very little, very small number, there was a feeling among many people that the public television is something which should be protected. Because if something is in the private hands, you can't change it. There is the owner, and the owner has the right to create its own rules. But the public television is ours, so we have the right, as a citizens, to fight for changing this television, to fight for presenting by these programs, these televisions, our own views as well, our problems. So now it's the biggest broadcaster in Poland. Of course, it should be told as well. It is hugely supported by the government now. Yeah, about 2 billion zlotys every year is given because people don't pay this mandatory charge. So this is the way in which the state pay instead of the citizens. Yeah, this is the tricky way, I would say. I think that the worst situation is on the daily newspapers market, because I feel the falling numbers and I think the falling of importance. So some of these newspapers has strong websites, and yes, then it works. But of course, the money are different. Yeah, so how to create this is important. My general opinion is that now we are in the situation in which the huge media companies are able to survive, the kind of monopoly. Yeah, for example, this which I mentioned. If you have the half of the Polish market, you may do everything. You may compete with Facebook, with Google, and I think that the smaller as well have the chance to survive. It is my company. We are able to cut costs. We are able to focus on our product. We are able to specialize. In my opinion, in the worst situation are the average media companies, which has huge costs. They have to spend a lot of money for their management, for things like this, but they are unable to compete with these giants. So, and I see this on the Polish market, when many average media companies collapsed during the several last years. So I think the market is changing, is dramatically changing, and on the one hand we have many problems which were mentioned here. On the other hand, there were more of editorial offices than anywhere. There is more people in this journalism industry than it was. There is one small change. 10 years ago, in Poland, for example, the people from the middle class were very happy when their son or daughter decided to become a journalist. Now, not. Now, this is, again, I would say, like it was in the history, in the beginning of the press, this is the way for rather poorer people. This is the way in which people from the countryside may start in the big city. But I see families, rich families, and no, they don't want their children to be in this business. They want their children to be a lawyer. They want the children to be in a manager, doctor. Yeah, this is the solid job. And I do agree. Yeah, there are many people in this industry, but it's very difficult to find the job, the position, the post in which we can be able to say that this is the solid job for the next 10 years. Yeah, everything may change every day. But yeah.
Thank you. Matthias, you have already touched upon the issue of relationship between politics and media. I'd like to ask you about a question on the main political players and their influence on the media, and also on your personal experience. You have all, as editors-in-chief, also journalists, have you ever experienced any direct influence by politics? In what form, if yes?
In the private medias, let's say, take an example of Prime Minister Andrej Babiš, because there's an obvious collision of interest. He owns the biggest media group, and he's a politician. Even in these medias, it's not like that he would, call on a daily basis the editor-in-chief and say, you should write this or that. He basically has it not to write something, but don't write something. Basically, the journalists there know that, to start some sort of investigative digging in prime minister scandals would probably not be very appreciated. And this sort of self-censorship is enough to stop them to write it. So he has it basically so that the media will not investigate on him, especially not because he bought the main Czech political daily. That in the past, when on the front page of this political daily called Mladá fronta dnes, something about some politicians was some scandal or whatever, that mean that this politician was over. So this will not happen to Andrej Babiš obviously anymore. As for the others, they pretty much don't interfere in the media. They really have it, as I said, as a last weapon resort, the last resort weapon. I personally don't remember being influenced by the owners of the medias. You are more influenced by, let's say, some sort of atmosphere that is in the medias. When I work for the public TV, for example, then that's basically a sort of self-ruled body because it's so big and it's so interconnected also with the cultural sphere and so on that no director of it and not even a politician dares, somehow to change the structure or, to reform the TV and so on, because all these influential people from the show business, from cultural sphere and so on, they will go on strike. So when I was in the public TV, then you obviously feel that your colleagues are mainly liberal, even though not that much in the, let's say, horrible woke way that we know now from the West. So it was more complicated to get with some topics on air, But it was not a direct suppression of conservative journalists, and definitely not from the owners. As for I remember when I was working for a weekly called Respect, it was owned by our former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Karel Schwarzenberg, a very interesting, colorful person. He was always very, very kind, but he considered himself to be a good Christian. And when a colleague of mine wrote that it's a pity that the Israelis didn't kill Yasser Arafat when they had the chance somewhere in Lebanon in 1982, then he just made a call like that. He understands that it's somehow against his belief that we should write that someone should be killed. That's a sort of influence by an owner of a media in Czech mild situation. Especially that was till the 2013. Nothing hard.
When there's a change in government, does it mean a replacement of the editors, the directors at the public television?
No, definitely not.
Okay, thank you. Slovakia.
Sorry, what was the question again?
Relationship between politics and media, and of course, in the light of the Kuciak assassination, you can tell us if there was any improvement or change.
So first of all, then about the Kuciak assassination, just very shortly, he was an investigative journalist for Aktuality.sk. He was around my age, so around 30 years old, and one February evening in 2018, two men went into his house and shot him in the head, and his fiancée too. And after that, the Slovak media landscape changed, and I feel the Slovak medias got more powerful. They got more readers. They got more power to influence politics. So backwards, the things changed. For example, in the Kuciak trial, during the Kuciak trial, the Slovak media So this guy Marian Kochner, who is an oligarch, and he is accused of ordering the killing of Jan Kuciak, he was acquitted on the first degree. Yeah. So in Slovakia there is a senate, judicial senate, 3 people, and the Slovak media wrote how these 3 judges vote about this sentence, and this is illegal. But nobody cared about this. They shouldn't write it. They couldn't. I don't know how they get this information. So this is just an example, but it speaks for itself, I think. About the politics. So I work as a journalist and editor since 2018. Direct control I never met, but maybe you know about this. The Hungarian party in Slovakia called Szövetség just started its work from 3 parties, 3 Hungarian parties, and there was this this suggestion during the unification process that the Hungarian press should keep the information about the bumps of this road to himself, that we shouldn't interfere into the unification process, because it's an obvious answer for Hungarian minority that there must be and can be only one political party.
Sorry, and what was your response? Did you write about it, ignore the bumps, or reported on the bumps?
Luckily, I didn't have the position to decide about those things. I say that honestly, that I felt lucky that I don't have to make those choices. I don't know what would I do.
Poland? Relationship between politics and media?
Yeah, Poland is different, I think. Poland is a bigger country, and this is almost 38 million people, so I think the fight is harder. Whenever I visit Hungary, Czech Republic or Slovakia, I am impressed and sometimes shocked how calm these media are. It's in Poland there is the real fight, I think, and no mercy. And we are very strong divided into 2 societies of journalists, I would say, 2 groups. And the companies are divided as well. And the left wing business usually give the advertisements only to the left-wing media, and the state companies give the advertisements mainly to the conservative media, but not sometimes to the left as well. But it has very unexpected consequences, I would say, because of course we have biased media. I may say our main media are biased. Yeah, pro-government or anti-government or left-wing, right-wing, but due to the fact that all of these media are very aggressive, are very sometimes brutal, I think that everything is checked. Even the left-wing media are checked by right-wing media. Yeah? And there is no politician who is able to hide something from the public eyes. Of course, it will be published rather by the media who are against him, but it will be published. So this system is strange. I didn't create him, and I think nobody wouldn't create this kind of the system. But this is the direct result of the 90s and the beginning of the 20th century, when the conservative voices were suppressed, and the result was that we created new companies, new media. We tried to survive. But there is a fight, and there was a fight, and there is a fight. So in Poland, the relation between politicians and the media companies, I think, are very close. They are a bit different on the left side and on the right side, but they are. And one may say this is the huge problem. Somebody may say this is the life.
And I must say that you were smiling at Matyar's answer when he denied the possibility of replacing editors and directors at the public television. That was a yes to the question, wasn't it, in case of Poland?
No, Poland, yeah, in Poland the public television is I think more governmental television than the public, but you know, we experienced many situations in which German newspaper for Poles or in Ringer Axel Springer Polska, there were cases when the editor-in-chiefs were fired due to the pressure, because of the pressure from the left-wing politicians. So it occurs on both sides, I would say. So my answer was to create my own small company. I may face the pressure, but I'm the owner, so it's impossible to fire me.
Zoltán, situation in Hungary and at your media empire.
Yeah, I think so. There is in Hungary there is this discussion always that this is my impression that a big part of the left-wing media, they always say they are independent. So they are független, objektív, independent, objective, as they say. I think such thing as an objectivity, that we are humans. As a human, you can't be objective. That's my opinion. Of course, you can be serious with your work. You can make investigation. You go after the facts, you try to underline it, but you always have some kind of feeling, some kind of idea, some kind of imagination how it was, because all the information you never will have. So I think there is the distinction that I think the right-wing conservative media is telling that they are conservative. The left-wing liberal, they say they are objective independent, but it's even some of them, for example, some years ago started some years ago, that even news are not news anymore, but they write opinions. They write opinions which is nice, what is beautiful, what they hate, what they don't like. So it's a dramatic change, I think, in the media. If you read, for example, how they wrote about our conference yesterday and about my speech especially. So I read it in Hungarian because I loved it. Szalai Zoltán az általa vezetett MCC végtelennek látszó vagyonával a háta mögött az MTV híradása szerint anélkül, hogy hangosan elkuncogta volna magát, maga is elismételte, hogy a liberális médiumok folytatnak politikai ideológiai küzdelmet Magyarországon. And that was the news. That's a fact. But it's, as you see, it's not, anélkül, hogy elkuncogta volna magát, it's not a fact, it's just their opinion. And they even, as you can read, they weren't here. They were just reading the news agency and they comment the things in the news. And I think if you after that tell that, yeah, this is independent, objective, I think it's not the truth 100%, I would say. So there is this divideness in the Hungarian media. I think everybody imagines that, for example, Media works where Mandiner belongs, that every day is coming a phone call and yeah, you have to do this and that. But media doesn't work like this. So, for example, you could see here yesterday some of Mandiner's journalists, Szilvai Gergő, Rajcsányi Gellér. For these people, you can tell one time or two times, yeah, please, but then it won't work. Then they will do something else. So it doesn't work like this. That you influence people day by day. It's just, and that's my bad news. These people think what they write. So what they are writing about and how they write it and how they think it. Such a youngster like Kohány Mátyás, I don't know if he's here. You can't say what you want. What he should write. He writes what he thinks, and I think it's a value. And it's the same, I think, in the left-wing media as well. Those people think. I don't believe that just for money they write these sentences. They think it's right what they do, but I think we should. So both on the left and both on the right, everybody should believe that these people are doing these things by heart. They believe what they do, and in my case or in our case in Mandiner, I can tell it that these people are thinking what they do. Of course, there are sometimes huge discussions in the redaction that should we do this cover or that cover? Can we do this picture? No, it's not nice, or it's ethical or not ethical, and what is the border where we can go? And always when I meet Michał, he says that we are extra calm. So Mandiner is too nice to be true. But that it's really a decision of these people who are working there, and you can't go behind the border, not just because of the readers, but because of our journalists as well, because that's how they live their life, and you can't change people. You can select good people and the good mix of people. That is what for example, as an editor-in-chief, you can do.
We have one question from the floor asking if you think a dedicated V4 platform for media would be useful. Whoever wishes to answer. So a dedicated V4, meaning a collaboration among the V4 countries in the area of media, a united media platform.
There is one, no, Zoltán?
There's a collaboration of the public televisions.
Yes.
They have a V4 news channel program. Or not channel,
news
it's
agency
just a
too, like V4NA.
That's
news
not
agency.
not V4 platform. That's from London, actually,
Okay,
as far as I know, using the V4. But V4 is a cooperation of the public television. V4.
Okay, so you mean official cooperation, like between the states?
Official, unofficial,
like
I don't know. You could have the conservative media platforms working together, or the liberal ones. I don't know. If in the audience we can have the person who asked this question, it's possible to specify it.
I try to give with Matthias. We had already a discussion in Warsaw about this question with other members of the V4 media. I think what is important is that and that's why I'm happy that I know these guys and we get to know each other, and also this conference and this whole V4 panel is important, that we often pick the news that we read about the Czech Republic, about Slovakia, about Poland from international sources, from English sources, from German sources, and of course they are also sources of sources, and they are not the local ones who know all the exact details. So every time when I talk with Michał talk about situation in Poland, he always has a very different view and things that I never imagined because I don't know Poland. And I think it would, I don't know if a V4 portal or whatever is the solution, but somehow that we get direct information from these countries is very important, and that if we could achieve it, I think it would increase the quality of the journalism that we do, because if we copy-paste something from BBC or from CNN, or not your CNN, but from CNN or from German newspapers, that's not the best source, because they are also second or third sources.
Other opinions, comments?
Yeah, I always think to myself, we need to make these web of connections. I think this conference, Zoltán, you will correct me if I'm wrong, this conference is all about this web, to make these connections between like-minded people in the V4 or even in Western Europe or even in the USA. Just one example, for when I'm in the editorial room and something happens in Hungary or even in Poland, I try to use those information sources, those web pages that are on, I will be blunt, on our side, you know, like right-leaning, conservative, Christian values. So this way I generate clicks, viewers, and even revenue to these colleagues, to these web pages. So something happens in Hungary, I don't use, I don't know, Index or 444, I use Mandiner or Magyar Nemzet. It's so simple, I think. This is where it begins.
Matthias?
Yeah. I just want to emphasize that the direct meetings, these are the most important things. We should know each other, we should exchange our experiences, we should exchange the knowledge and even our phone numbers, yes, because even in case we can call. This is true. I thank you, Zoltán, for describing the situation. Very often in Polish media we have the news about Hungary from German media or from American media, and I don't think this is the way it should work in the future. And so let me thank you as well for invitation for this conversation. I think it's absolutely successful, and it will bring some good fruits. Let's say it will pay off.
Mátyás?
Yeah, a few points to this, because how does it usually work with the stories from other countries? Most of the journalists, they pick up it from the agencies, AFP, AP, Reuters, or especially their national agencies, like the Czech press agency, Četek, in our case. How do the people from Czech press agency get news from Hungary? Well, they don't speak Hungarian, obviously, as well as they don't speak Polish. So they pick up it from English-speaking sources, because most of them speak only English. How do the English-speaking sources get it? Well, very often, let's say in the case of Hungary, there is some English tweeting opposition journalist in Hungary tweeting something about Viktor Orbán will abolish the parliament, you know. And someone will take it over from him, and then it will spread like a fire through all the medias, and then it will come back through all over the world, back to the Czech Republic, which is like a few hundred kilometers from Hungary. But no one dares to pick up the phone and call someone in Hungary, or check the website of the Hungarian parliament if it's really closed, you know, and whatever, army stays in the barracks. And they automatically take it over, especially because everyone knows that Viktor Orbán is eating babies for dinner, so why should he not abolish the parliament? So obviously, the same was with another perfect example, other LGBT-free zones in Poland. Well, they do not exist. It was everything a sort of performance by one gay artist who created this table where there's LGBT-free zone written, and he made a picture of himself and he put it on internet, and it went through some, you know, Canadian news channel, and then it went all the way back. And, you know, even in Czech medias, we just repeatedly say this is not true, and so on and so on. And it's still there, like 2 years, I think, after this happened. It's still in Western media, so even in Czech medias. So what is really important, and I'm saying to my reporters, like, never trust anything about Hungary and Poland, you know. You can get from, you know, agencies a good story about Afghanistan. It might well be true, but if it is about Poland, which is right next door, or Hungary, you just need to confirm it. And so obviously some sort of, let's say, English-speaking website about Central Europe might be good, and there exist the Remix, the Visegrád Post, and so on. But the journalists are quite conservative. They are really used, you know, the first thing you go on is your national press agency. So they watch it, and if this will not change, then this is problematic. So you only need to do what we do, you know, no context, know whom to call when you need something from Hungary or Poland. Other point is, I also run a small conservative website, and we have a special part called Visegrád, where we have news from Poland and from Hungary especially. And someone is watching what the people love at most, you know. So let's not be too much optimistic. There is not some sort of deep interest in Hungary or Poland, you know. Czechs love Hungary and Poland when you stop immigrants on the border, or when Viktor Orbán says something strong about defending the European values or Christian values, or when the Polish say something strong about Brussels, so then everyone is like happy. But it's not some sort of like really deep interest about our neighbors. But it's a beginning, and you know, enemy of my enemy is my friend, and there is nothing what connects you more than a common enemy. So in that case, migration, or, you know, the wokeism, or, you know, the progressivist Brussels, it's a good target.
Well, media is really an exciting word. My first experience was when I was asked to give a commentary on a Hungarian act recently adopted. I made a 2-sentence comment. When it was on the television, there was one single word missing from my comment. That was no. So it's really an exciting word. We got some insight to the operation of some media outlets. Thank you so much for your contribution. Thank you very much for taking part in this panel.